everyone, welcome to an amazing session today. Myself, Dr. Madhuri, is all here for your next chapter, that is control and coordination. Let's see that how our organ system are interconnected and what is the one which you are controlling. That is our brain. Brain is a controlling center, all of you know. Let's see that how plants are coordinated. Do plants also have a brain? How they are going to transmit the signal, just like this chui mui. You have just heard about the chui mui plant or the sensitive plant. You can say that how they're gonna sense that we are there, how they are sense their stimuli. So let's find out, let's explore it today. Let's see what we are going in our plate today. We have our plate that what are receptors. What are receptors? Anything in your mind, ma'am? Maybe a cell, maybe that collect information. Lot of it. Let's see the next topic, that is your nervous system. Obviously, nervous system is your main function because it controls all the body functioning, all the hormonal system that is controlled by nervous system. Let's see the parts of it also. Let's see that what are plant hormones. Do plants have the plant hormones also? That's a glitch. That what are plants hormones and where do they stay? Let's see. And what is endocrine system? Heard about it, endocrine system? Yes, ma'am. The one which basically releases all the hormones which is essential for the body. So yes, we have lot of things today to explore. Let's start with the one that is your receptors. What are receptors? Receptors are the, write it down, that what are receptors? Receptors are the tip of, receptors are the tip of nerve fibers that collect all the information, that collect all the information that need to be conducted by the nerve. Oh, ma'am, it's too much complicated, isn't it? Let me give you an example. Suppose you're sitting in an exam and you have an invigilator. So what your invigilator do? They just collect all the information, that is your papers, and deliver to your respective teacher. So just think of it that your invigilator are the receptors. They are the fine nerve fibers that collect all the information that need to be conducted by the nerve. Same you can relate with your invigilator in the class, that they collect all the test papers and they deliver to the respective teacher. So this is a tip for you to remember that what are receptors. Let's move further, that what is the definition. They are the specialized tips. They are the specialized tips of the nerve fiber that collect information that conducted by the nerve. Basically, they collect all the stimuli, all the sensory, what can I say, that all the sensory nerves. Okay, they are conducted by the sensory neuron. All the receptors are connected by your sensory neurons. Then they are the sense organs of the animals. Receptors are in the sense organs. Obviously, they are classified as phonoreceptors. Now let's see the chart of the receptors, that what are the types of receptors. So what are the receptors? Receptors are the specialized, I'm repeating it again, that receptors are the specialized tip. They are the specialized tip of the nerve fibers, that is used, that collect all the information that is conducted by the nerves. So let's see that what are the types of receptors now. What are the types of receptors? The first type which we are going to study is your phonoreceptors. Phonoreceptors. photoreceptors are basically present in inner ear. They are present in inner ear, and they basically get the information about the audio stimulus. They get the information about the audio stimulus. Also, the second one is your photoreceptor. Photoreceptors are of two types, that is your rods and cones. They basically collects all the visual stimulus. The third one receptor is your olfactory. That is basically sense your smell, responsible for the smell. Fourth one is your thermoreceptors. They are your thermoreceptors, which basically collects all the stimulus of touch, pain, and pressure. One more receptor is there, that is your gustatory receptors. Now, what is this gustatory receptor? They basically collects the stimulus of taste. They are present on taste buds, in tongue. So these are the five main receptors you can see here. Now let's move further. That photoreceptors are present in the eye. Function, they are responsible for the visual stimulus. Thermoreceptors, they are present on the skin. Now they are very minute and they are present on the skin, and whenever it feels, it gives you pressure, it gives you pain, it collects that stimulus through the sensory neuron, so that it can reset by the spinal cord and get back to the motor neuron. These receptors are also known as thermoreceptors, known as thermoreceptors, as well as they are also known as the thigmoreceptors also. Let's move further. Let's see the olfactory receptors. Olfactory receptors are basically collects all the information about the smell. Now let's see the gustatory. These are present on the tongue. Here you can see the diagram. This is a taste bud, and here you can see the gustatory hairs where all the gustatory receptor present. They help in the taste detection. Basically, they help in taste detection. Let's move further. Let's see that what we have. We're having a nervous system now. What is the nervous system? Nervous system is composed of specialized tissue known as neurons. It is the nervous system which is mainly responsible for control and coordination in complex animals. Basically, what is the nervous system? Nervous system is the specialized tissue through which all the organs are coordinated in complex organism. Let's study the fundamental unit. What is the fundamental unit of nervous system? That is your nerve cell. So what is the neuron? What is a neuron? Neuron is a fundamental unit is the fundamental unit of nervous system. It is divided into axon and cyton. Now let's move further. Function of nervous system. Basically, it receives the information from all the other part of the environment, all the body. It receives all the information from the various body part to act accordingly through the muscles and the glands. So these are the main three functions of the nervous system. Let's move further. A neuron. Now I have just told you that a neuron is a structural and functional. It is a fundamental unit or the functional unit of the nervous tissue. Neuron is a highly specialized cell because that transmit the electrical impulse from one neuron to another neuron. Right, so that is a specialized tissue, and what I have said that a neuron is a structural functional unit of the nervous system. It is a fundamental unit of your nervous system. Let's move further. That transmission of nerve impulse. That what the characteristics feature do we have? We have in the nerve cell. That is your cyton. First of all, a cyton consists of cytoplasm, nucleus, Nissl granules, and all the cell organelles. Nissl granules, mitochondria, and so on. Right, now mitochondria and so on. Now here is a glitch that after a cyton there is an axon hillock. That starts the starting of the axon, then axon, and then axon terminal, and then axon terminal. Axon terminal. Now let's go back and let's see that what is it. That a cell body cyton is somewhere of a star shaped. Now it is of your star shaped as there is long hair-like structure known as your dendrites. They are the hair-like structures, or you can see over which gather all the impulses, that is known as your hair-like structures known as your dendrites. Dendrite receive the nerve impulses. Now what is a nerve impulse? What is an impulse meaning? Impulse meaning is of electrical signal. It is of your electrical signal. Now let's move further. Axon is a tail of neuron. As you all know that the tail is, this part is known as your axon. Now let's see that what next, what it is, that the ending of an axon is basically determined as your axon terminals, and in your NCERT it is written as your nerve endings. So nerve endings and axon terminals are the same thing. Now the axon terminals relay the nerve impulses. Now what is this myelin sheet? It is an insulating sheet which help to intact the neuron, which help in intact so that the impulses could could get through in one axon. No other impulse can interfere over it. Now there is an insulator cover around an axon. This is known as the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath insulate the axon against nerve impulses from the surrounding. As I have told you, that it makes the axon intact so that no other nerve impulse can invade in that axon. So that is the main function of your myelin sheath. Myelin sheath is made up of your fats. Okay, so let's move further. Let's see what we have. Another thing, type of neurons. We have a basic different three type of neurons. We are having a motor neuron and the sensory neurons. The basically nerves which are present in your sense organs, that is your sensory neurons. That is basically surrounded by your sensory neurons. How? Now these neurons receive signals from the sense organ. That is your sense neuron. Motor neuron, these neurons send signals to a muscle or a gland. Okay, they basically try to connect with the muscle fiber or a gland. Associated or relay neuron, these neurons relay the signals between the sensory and your motor neurons. They are also known as your interneuron. They are also known as your interneuron. Let's move further. Synapse. What is synapse now? It is the junction between the two. It is the junction between the two neuron. Neuron 1, neuron 2. Now, the junction between the two neurons, is named as your synapse beta. Now, the point of contact between the terminal branches of axon of one neuron. That means of neuron 1, there will be an axon. There will be an They are basically in neuron 1 there is axon terminal N1 is your axon terminal and neuron 2 there is a starting of it, that is dendrite of neuron 2, it is connected with dendrite of another neuron. So here is the one, that it is the point of contact between the terminal of the branches of axon terminal of one neuron with the dendrite of another neuron is known as your terminal. Here, write it down, terminal. That is known as your synapse. That is known as your synapse. Now, what is neuromuscular junction? In later on, I'll be discussing in detail. So, let's see that what is it. NMJ, that is neuromuscular junction, is a point where the muscle fibers come in contact with the motor neuron. As I have told you that what is the function of motor neuron? That motor neuron send a signal to the muscle fiber for the movement. Done. Let's move further. Transmission of a nerve impulse. Let's see how an electrical signal transfer from one neuron to the next neuron. Let's see. that nerve impulses travel in the following manner from one neuron to the next neuron. So let's see that dendrites. Dendrites, first of all, they basically get collected through the dendrites. Then it comes to the cyton, that is your cytoplasm of the nerve of your neuron. Then it comes to the axon hillock, and then it goes to the tail where it is surrounded by your myelin sheath. And after the axon get ended, there goes to your axon terminal, and then it goes to the synapse where the electrical impulse is converted into your chemical impulse. Then your chemical reaction, basically that chemical will bind with the receptor present on your dendrite, and then this is how an impulse is transferred from one neuron to another neuron. Let's see here that dendrites, cell body, axon, then nerve ending to the tip of an axon, then synapse, then dendrite to the next neuron. Chemical is released from axon tip of one neuron across the synapse, that is known as your neurotransmitter. That neurotransmitter bind with that chemical and get again attached and then again attached to the dendrite of a next neuron. Let's see what is human nervous system. Now, human nervous system in humans can be divided into your three parts. That is your central nervous system, peripheral nervous system, and your autonomous nervous system. Let's read it one by one, that what they are. So let's try with the central nervous system. The central nervous system basically, are basically composed of the brain and the spinal cord. The brain controls all the function of the human body. The spinal cord work as your relay channel for getting the signals get relayed and get the action between the brain and the peripheral nervous system. Let's move forward. Let's see what peripheral nervous system do. Peripheral nervous system is composed of the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves. They are basically PNS is basically the supporting system of central nervous system. Now there are 12 pair of cranial nerves, right? We are having maxillary nerve, mandibular nerve, olfactory nerve, vagus nerve, right? These are the cranial nerves. The cranial nerves come out of the brain and goes to the organs in the head region. There are 31 pair of spinal nerves. 31, not 31 pair, basically they are 31 in number. The spinal nerve comes out from the spinal cord and goes to the organs where they have head region. Let's read about the autonomous nervous system. Autonomous nervous system is composed of a chain of a nerve ganglion which runs along the spinal cord. It controls all the involuntary actions. It controls all the involuntary actions of the body. The autonomous is sympathetic and parasympathetic. When it comes in action of an organ, then it activates the sympathetic nervous system. Where it comes to the rest, and then it activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Later on we'll discuss this part of autonomous nervous system. Highlights the activity of an organ as per the need. For example, during running, there is an increased demand of oxygen by the body. This is fulfilled by an increased breathing rate and increased heart rate. The sympathetic nervous system works to increase the breathing and your heart rate. So here I am saying, here what I said, conclude about it. The sympathetic nervous system is basically work on to increase the capacity of the working of an organ, and parasympathetic suppress the activity and comes back to the resting stage. So let's move further. Parasympathetic nervous system. Now what is this parasympathetic nervous system? This nervous system is autonomous this nervous system is a part of autonomous system that slow down the activity of an organ and thus claiming effect. Like during the sleep, the breathing rate slow down. So goes the heart rate also. This is facilitated by a parasympathetic nervous system. Okay. So it can be said that the parasympathetic nervous system help in the conservation of energy, that it activates when there will be a need of conservation of your energy. Let's move further. Now, what is this control and coordination? Control and coordination that regulates to establish the dialogue between your body parts. That is the nervous system and that is your endocrine system. They both are interconnected. Okay, they both are interconnected. Let's move further. Now, let's see about the nervous system built from a neurons and glial cells. Now, neurons are actually conducting information cells, whereas glial cells are the supporting systems. They support the system. They are quick and have to be physically connecting the two parts. That is your neuron. Let's move further. Perception of a change. Now, how this perception of change occurs? Any change in environment produces is known as stimulus. That is change in environment is known as a stimulus. Now, these changes when happen in a neuron, it gives rise to a change. Now, this change travel across neuron to reach to the other. That means if change starts from here, from a dendrite, it goes travel down and then it reaches to the next one. So what is the perception of change? These change when happen in a neuron give rise to a change. This change travel across a neuron, reach to the next neuron. Okay. Now, here you can see the hair-like structure is your dendrite, beta. Look at here. Then the cell body, that is your cyton. And the one small hick-like structure, that is your axon hillock. Here you can see the myelin sheath, nerve ending and your axon terminal, beta. Right? Okay, let's move further. Let's have a quick rapid fire here. That which of the following is a fundamental unit of brain? That is your neuron, ma'am. Yes, that is your neuron. And I'll be just giving you one slider so that you can hit your brain, and I want to see that whether you are listening me or not. So let's move to the next one. That what is between the neuron? Between the neuron, as I've told you, there is a synapse, beta. Can you see this one? That the blue one is your axon terminal, whereas your pink one is your dendrite of a next neuron. Dendrite of next neuron. So let's start with the topic of ionic distribution. Now, what is this ionic distribution? Now let's zoom in about an axon, and here are different channels. That is your potassium channel and your potassium channel and your sodium channel. Right? Now, how this change will occur? This will change occur when there will be a difference in the concentration. How will change will occur? When there will be a difference in the concentration of the ions. That is your Na and your potassium. And from where they get the entries? They are having a potassium gate channels and your sodium gate channels. As you can see in the picture, that now and at the nodes. Between the two nodes, there is a position, there is a place known as your nodes of Ranvier. At the nodes of Ranvier, there is no charge. There will be no charge. Now, when the membrane got the charge, it will get repolarized, right? By first it generate the action potential, and then it will be charged and it will be repolarized, and then when it moved to another one, it get depolarized. Now this is the repeated cycle of repolarization, that is the gaining of charge, and the depolarization, that is cancelling of charge cycle, helps in the jumping of that impulse, that is your electrical impulse. Now you can see in this picture that what is actually happens due to change in the Na concentration and potassium concentration, the potassium gate channel will open, the Na gate channel will also open, and what will be happening? That due to the change beta, due to the change in the concentration, there will be a cycling of repolarization as well as your depolarization. The repeating cycles help to jump from one exon to next exon beta. Right? So let's move further. That is the ionic distribution. As you can see that here the Na is coming inside, that it generated an action potential. Now while it generated an actual potential, it is gaining a charge, that is repolarization, and again there will be a place, then it will be a cancelling of the charge because it moves to the +1 and the -1. You can see over here that whenever if sodium is coming inside, it will generate a negative charge on a membrane, and when basically potassium goes out, it will be generating a positive charge, then positive negative will be attracted, and this is the polarization because it is gaining a charge, and this is depolarization. So the repeated cycle, the depolarization of the membrane spread in the neighboring region to initiate the action potential again. So this is the one cycle, repeated cycle from one exon to the next exon to the next region of the exon, help in the conduction of an nerve impulse. Let's move forward. Myelin sheath, you can see over here that what is the function of the myelin sheath is basically help to intact. It helps to intact the nerve impulse. It helps to intact the nerve impulse from the surroundings. Junction, the impulse causes the release of specialized chemical known as neurotransmitter. The neurotransmitter bind to a special receptor on the membrane, that is dendrite, which basically bind with the next one of the neuron. This start the information transfer from the next neuron. So this is the whole function, that how is neuron is gonna work and is gonna basically help to transport this electrical impulse from one neuron to the next neuron. So let's move forward. Types. You can see over here that in a multipolar there are basically two region of a dendrite and one is your cell body. You can see unipolar, that it is only having a one dendrite region, bipolar, that it is having a two portion, and this is your pseudo unipolar. It looks like it is a unipolar, but it is actually not, because it's a pseudo means false, right? So these are the types, as I can told you. Let's move forward. Let's move forward to the brain. Brain is the most complex structure of a body, as it controls all the function. Your brain is divided into your forebrain, midbrain, and your hindbrain. Your forebrain is basically the major thinking process. With that, they have the center for hearing, smell, and so on. Hearing, smell, and so on. Forebrain is divided into cerebrum. It is divided into the cerebrum and your diencephalon. And cerebrum is also divided into cerebral cortex and inner medulla. You can see midbrain. Hindbrain is divided into pons, medulla, and cerebellum. Let's move forward. Cerebral surface beta is uneven, as it is made up of sulci and gyri. That is, the sulcus is a space. It is basically spaces, sulci, and cerebrum is divided into two hemispheres, that is your right and your left. That it is also divided into outer cortex and your inner medulla, as I have told you. That cortex is having a gray matter. What is this gray matter? It is basically for your intelligence. It basically helps to see that how much knowledge you have, how much intelligent power you have, that is decided by your gray matter, that is your cytons, and it is surrounded by your white matter, that is your axon, that is your inner medulla. Islands of gray matter are even distributed within the white matter base nuclei. Now let's move to the lateral ventricles. Fluid cavity exists as C-shaped. They are having a C-shaped structures, beta. I hope you got it. Let's move forward. How the Josh is high. Now let's see about the cerebral hemisphere. That it is divided into your right and your left. Your right hemisphere is basically helping controlling the left side of the body, whereas your left hemisphere is going to see about the working of the right part of the body. Let's move forward. Cerebral cortex is basically contributes to the major thinking, that what you are actually thinking, perception and voluntary memory task. Whatever you are memorizing, it is basically done by whom? That is done by cortex. It receives information from the lower centers. 40% of brain mass is basically acquired by your outer cortex. And domains, localization of function exist, however, clear demarcation do not exist. Chaliye. Lobes. We're having 4 major lobes. That is your frontal lobe. Then we are having temporal lobe, parietal lobe, and your occipital lobe. Let's see about the lobes as well. Now, what is this cerebrospinal fluid? What is this cerebrospinal fluid? It basically runs through the spinal cord and your brain. What does actually it do? It basically provide nutrition. Mechanical cushion, and it also carries the excretory product. Also. Now this is basically help to giving a mechanical cushion to the brain. Also it carries the nutrition, and also it carries your excretory product which is excreted by the cells. Let's move forward. Diencephalon. This is a 3-part. It is divided into epithalamus, thalamus, and your hypothalamus. What is this epithalamus? Epithalamus is a region where your pineal gland exists. What is this pineal gland? It is just like a small rice. A bit of rice, that is a small gland. That is a pineal gland that releases a melatonin. Melatonin is an actual. It is responsible for the sleep. That is why it helps in sleep. It is responsible for the sleep cycle as well. Now, what is this thalamus? Thalamus is a relay center. That is a major site. And also, what is this hypothalamus? It basically controls your body temperature. That is your hemostasis and your endocrine president. Yes, it is an endocrine president. It basically connects the endocrine system with the nervous system. That is your hypothalamus. Optic chiasma and pituitary hang up from here. It is a visceral control center and awareness. Center of emotional response is your diencephalon. That is whatever the feeling you are feeling right now. That is basically because of this diencephalon. Let's move forward. Sleep-wake cycle. Third ventricle exit here connected to the lateral ventricles on both sides, and also it connects to the fourth ventricle of the hindbrain. Brainstem. It is histologically same as your spinal cord because it is surrounded by your gray matter and white matter. Midbrain along with the pons and medulla because it is the stem. You can say that it is a stem, and also fourth ventricle across pons and medulla continues to central canal along the spinal cord. Now, let's move forward. Midbrain. What does this actual midbrain do? The cerebral aqueduct connects the third ventricle to the fourth one. These are the ventricles which they are connected through. It gives rise to the two cranial nerves. Now you need to tell me that what are the two cranial nerves which is arise from the midbrain. Also, we can see that it is a center of auditory and visual reflex. Also, it conducts the motor information to the cerebellum. Now make a note of it that yes, it is a connect. Midbrain is a connect between the motor. It basically passes the motor information to the cerebellum. It releases the dopamine. Let me just tell you about one fact about dopamine. If dopamine is reduced in the body, there is a condition known as Parkinson's disease, where it is basically seen in your major aged persons. You can see over here, it is basically done in seen in your 60 to 70 years of age of persons due to deficiency of dopamine. Now this dopamine, due to deficiency of dopamines, body will undergo extremely tremors, and also it cannot be able to judge about the balancing of the body. That is a major symptom in the Parkinson's disease. Let's see that it is an integrated information between the cerebrum and your cerebellum. Now, let's move forward. Once that it passes information from the spinal cord to the higher center. Basically, what pons do? Pons basically help to transfer the information from the spinal cord to the higher centers. It established the talk between the cortex and the cerebellum. Now, some cranial nerves originate from here. Pontine respiratory center. Make a note of it. It is a respiratory center as well. That is your pons. Let's move to the medulla oblongata. Now, this is a crossing over happens here. That means the characteristic features which are basically exchanged, that is your crossing over happens here. Also, relay centers for somatic information from spinal cord to the sensory centers. It is a cardiovascular center and also a respiratory center as well. It is a center for vomiting, hiccups, swallowing, coughing and sneezing. Hypothalamus relays the information to the medulla. Are we clear? Are we clear? That means, now what are these? These centers, these functions, these actions are involuntary. These actions are involuntary. That means they cannot be controlled. So yes, medulla is the one who is actually controlling the involuntary actions. Let's move forward. Cerebellum. Now, possesses input from the cerebrum, appropriate pattern of muscle construction. White matter inside causes an abruptity, that is grey matter inside. On receiving the plan of a movement, it evaluates the position and plans the motor activity. That it plans the motor activity. Left versus right. What your left side is do? Left logic, like basically left hemisphere is responsible for the logics, calculations, language and analytic thinking. That is why males is having a stronger left portion, that is your left hemisphere. While if I talk about the right hemisphere, it is good for creativity, expression, emotional intelligence and your imagination. Right hemisphere is strong for women. As I have told you about all the brain functions, that sum up here only. Now let's move forward. Label it by yourself. Label it the brain. This is your homework, beta. This is your homework. You need to do it. Now, let's move to the next topic now. The next topic is peripheral nervous system. Let's discuss it in a one shot. That parasympathetic stimulates the energy availability, that is run and hide, whereas parasympathetic nervous system coming back to normal, that is rest and digest. This is the two mantra for this parasympathetic nervous system. Parasympathetic nervous system brings up spinal cord. Let's see about the spinal cord. That 3/4 of diameter, 17 inches in length, typically ends at the L1 and L2. That is your tail, that forming your this tail-like structure. Also, it is covered by meninges, vertebrae, interspersed within invertebral disc. Major reflex action. Spinal cord is a major reflex action beta. Now let's move forward. It includes the sensory receptors, peripheral nerves, and their associated parts. Sensation and perception occurs in brain beta. If I'll talk about sensory and perception, if you're forming one perception of a person, that is done by your brain. Let's move forward. As I have already told you, just sum up that what are the receptors? Receptors are mechanoreceptor, that is responsible for your touch, pressure and strength. Thermoreceptors, temperature changes. Photoreceptors for the light. Chemoreceptors for smell, taste and blood chemistry. And nociceptors potentially damage the stimuli, result in pain beta. Whenever you feel the pain, basically these nociceptors is basically there, which is breakdown. Okay, let's move to the next topic. Types of nerves, we are having mixed nerve, sensory nerve and a motor nerve. If I talk about the motor nerve, that is your hypoglossal nerve. Sensory nerve is your chorda tympani nerve, chordata tympani nerve. Chordata tympani nerve. And if I talk about the mixed nerve, that is your lingual nerve. That is your lingual nerve. Now these are the type of nerve. Don't be scared. You will be dealing in your MBBS studies. I have just given you a glimpse of it. Just grab it. Right? Let's move forward. Reflex action, that is your unconscious action beta, that gives the path of your reflex arc. Now what is this reflex arc? Let me just explain you. Suppose your hand, this is not a hand. A second beta. Suppose your hand and you just touched a warm vessel. Okay, you just touched a warm hot vessel. Hot vessel. The receptors present on your hand. What are these? Thermoreceptors. Thermoreceptors passes the information to the sensory neuron. This sensory neuron will pass the information to the integration center, that is your spinal cord or your integration center. Integration center. Then the information is passes to the motor neuron. It will goes to the effector. Effector, that is your muscle fiber. And then you will able to remove from hand. So this is an arch that is known as reflex arc. Your reflex arc. Or reflex arc. Okay, got it? Got it? Let's move further then. Components of reflex. Your receptor, sensory neuron, integration center, that is your monosympathetic or polysympathetic reflex, motor neuron, your effect. Done? Done? Peripheral nervous system is of two types, that is somatic and your autonomic. Autonomic can be divided into sympathetic and your parasympathetic. I already told you two transmitters that are used as acetylcholine A and your norepinephrine. Let's move forward. Here is a part of your plant hormones. Now, how these plants are really have the brain, or they are having a nervous system? No, they are actually not. Yeah, the plant growth regulates is advised. This can be effective in high concentration. They are not. They do need to be transported or several times at locality. Now let's see that what actually it says. If I'll talk about the chui mui plant, that is your chui mui plant, or I can say that it is belong to mimosa pudica. Okay, that is chui mui plant. That is your sensitive plant, beta. Sensitive plant. Now this movement, how this movement is basically sensed by this plant. Now for that we need to know about the growth. The growth can be dependent. Growth independent also. Can be dependent or independent. What is this dependent? Dependent, I would like to take an example of germination. And tropic movement. Independent. I'll say independent. We're having this movement only. That is your chui mui plant. How this movement basically there. Now let me explain you. While you touch that plant, gives the signals to the leaves that basically causes loss of water, and plant get shrink. Plant get shrink. Beta. So this is, and after few minutes it will come back again. This is a movement that is independent to growth. In germination, growth is basically slowly, but its growth is there. Now let's see about the plant growth regulators. Plant growth regulators that support growth and inhibit growth. Now, we are having an auxins auxins, globulin, cytokinin. These are the three hormones that is basically supports the growth. And if I'll talk about inhibitors, that is your ABA. ABA is abscisic acid, ethylene. Here, ethylene. That is your growth inhibitors. That is your growth inhibitors. Now let's see that you can see the nature, that is the shoot apex. Now here in the shoot, basically we are having a apical meristem, apical meristem, apical meristem joined with auxin and stimulate the growth of shoots and stimulates the growth of shoots. Also, it do the apical dominance. It is responsible for apical dominance. Okay, let's see. That is, as I've told you, support growth, inhibit growth, ABA ethylene, auxin, globulin and cytokine. Clear? Yes, ma'am, clear. Auxin, growth of the stem, root, and by the cell elongation, it delays the leaf senescence. Senescence means apoptosis, that is death. It promotes the apical buds, dominance, inhibit lateral branches, and it also induces parthenocarpy, that is fruit production without fertilization. Done? Yes, ma'am. Done. So let's make a thumbs up to the auxin then. Let's move to the next one. You can see over here the trophic movements, directional growth, moves to the shader size, causes cells to expand, and it also affects the gene expression. Cytokinin, you can see over here that it is responsible for the cell division and differentiation. Also in seed expansion and cotyledons, break dormancy and promotes seed and it promotes the germination. It also helps in chlorophyll synthesis. It inhibits the apical dominance. It basically inhibits the apical dominance. Root formation, if it is there, or vice versa, and modified form of adenine. Gribblins is basically responsible for the elongation of the internodes, and it is basically discovered by a Japanese scientist via fungus which releases this gribblin. Okay, that basically promotes the stem elongation. That is stem elongation. It promotes the fruit growth and parthenocarpy, and also it delays the senescence, that is your death. That is your apoptosis. Let's move forward. Now let's go with the inhibitors. What are inhibitors? Slow down the metabolic process. It inhibits the seed germination by inducing seed dormancy. It accelerates senescence. That means it basically causes a barrier that helps to disconnect with the connectivity of food and water. Also, it stimulates the closure of stomata, and it is called the stress hormone, no longer linked with bud dormancy and of an abscission. Now let's see with an ethylene. What is an ethylene? It is a gaseous PGR. It helps in ripening of the fruit, fruits, and also it is present in a refrigerator also. It promotes the root growth and your root hair formation. Also, it is responsible for the abscission of your leaf. Abscissions of the leaves. So this is the one that we have discussed about the inhibitors. PGR. Let's sum up here only that oxygen is blending towards the light. That means advantageous route, herbicides against the dicots, and apical dominance. Cytokinin is responsible for the cell division and differentiation and the development of embryo. Right? Gribblin stem elongation, fruit development, breaks seed dormancy by germination. ABA prevents germination here, closes stomata during drought. And ethylene. What is ethylene? Ethylene is the first one, that is a gaseous form. Also, abscission and triple response to the mechanical stress, apoptosis and senescence. This is a triple response. Now let's move to the movement. That is your trophic movement and your nastic movement. That is done by your touch and your light. What is done by light? If it is done by light, it is known as phototrophic. It is done by if it is done by light, it is known as phototrophic. If it is done by gravity, it is known as geotrophic. If it is done by water, hydrotrophic. And it is done by chemicals, that is your chemotropic. So, here we have discussed about the plant movements as well. Now let's see about the endocrine system. What is the main site? Let's see about your hypothalamus. Here is an hypothalamus. Hypothalamus is your president of your endocrine system. That it basically connects your endocrine system with the nervous system. Let's see that what we have in a plate. We have different glands. Let's start with your hypothalamus only. Hypothalamus, it gives signals to the pituitary gland. That is your master gland. That is known as your master gland. Now let's see some of the secretions of the gland. That is, first of all, let's see about your pineal gland. Pineal gland releases your melatonin that is responsible for the sleep. Right. Now, let's see about your thyroid gland. Thyroid gland is basically responsible for the secretion of thyroxine. And here is a condition also. If it is less synthesis can cause hypothyroidism, more secretion cause hyperthyroidism. Now, what does this thyroxine do? It helps in your fat metabolism. And also, iodine is needed. That is why we take iodized salt, if there will be a deficiency of iodine, it is caused the condition known as goiter. Now let's move further about the adrenal gland. Now what is this adrenal gland? Adrenal gland located top of, it is located top of the kidney, that releases two hormone, that is your cortisol and adrenaline. Adrenaline is a vasoconstrictor, and cortisol releases when you experiencing what? When you're experiencing scaredness. Okay, that cortisol is released when you are in position of thrill. Okay, that is the main hormone that is released, that is a cortisol. Now let's move to the next gland. Let's see what we have. Here you can see that when hypothalamus stimulates the pituitary gland releases FSH, that is thyroid stimulating hormone, ACTH, that is adrenal cortex. To the adrenal cortex is the target itself. Then we are having gonadotropins, hormones, FSH, LSH. Now let's see what else we have in the plate. As I've told you about the thyroid gland. Now the next one is your pancreas. Endocrine cells, that is the digestive enzymes, endocrine plant part, that is the islets of Langerhans, that basically releases your hormone, that is your insulin, that is your alpha cells, glucagon increases the blood sugar level. Beta cells insulin lowers the blood sugar level, beta. Now here is the big point, that in pancreas it basically stimulates the beta cell to release the insulin that will calm down that will basically decrease the blood sugar level in the blood. And if it doesn't happen, if insulin is not efficient, then there is a condition known as diabetes mellitus. To be more specific, that is diabetes mellitus 2. Diabetes mellitus 2. Diabetes mellitus 1 is caused due to hereditary, or that is idiopathic actually. Now, insulin. Liver, kidney and brain do not need insulin for glucose entry, but insulin participate in neural development, feeding behavior and memory. It also reduces breaking of glycogen into glucose. Now we are having a 2 diabetes, that is diabetes 1, that is hereditary, that is not effective whether insulin is released or not, and type 2 is it is not producing the effect. Now let's move forward. Now let's see about your adrenal gland. Now here the adrenal gland, you can see that it is basically located at your top, that is your adrenal gland. Outer region, corticoid, mineral corticoids, glucocorticoids is released. Inner side of the region releases an aldosterone that basically regulates the blood pressure. Now that is the last part of the lecture. I hope you all get all the points, all the bit by points, and I have just tried to be more appropriate and to be less time taking, and I'll be seeing you in the next lecture. See you there with me.